In this video, I'm going to talk about after-tax cash flow from the sale of the assets. This happens when you're selling an asset associated with the salvage value off the time. So we're going to go through first the calculation of that, and then I'm going to go through a complete example. So looking at this, the cash from the sale of an asset is going to be equal to the sales price minus the taxes that you pay. So in order to calculate the taxes, we want to know what the gain on the sale is. And then we multiply by a tax rate, which is often that 40% tax rate that we've used before. So the gain is equal to the sales price minus the book value. And the book value is equal to the initial investment minus all the depreciation you've taken to date. So when we go through this calculation, these are the methods we're going to use. There's also another way to do it, which is by using this equation. So in this equation, we take the sales price, and then all of this is the taxes that we've paid. So we're taking the sales price, the taxes are equal to the sales price minus the book value, and this is similar to the book value times the tax rate. So we can use that equation. I actually prefer to go through the calculations based on logic than apply the equations, but you can use the equations if you like. So let's look at an example. What is the after-tax cash flow on the sale of an asset? With the initial investment amount was $3,000, and the assets initially had a 5-year life and a $500 salvage value, and it was depreciated using straight line depreciation. So that whole first two sentences is about initially when we bought the asset, we thought we were going to have it for 5 years. But we sold it at the end of the 3rd year. So we want to know what was the cash from that sale. So we start by looking at what was the depreciation that was set up at the time of the purchase. And that depreciation was used straight line, which is I minus S over N. In this case, 3,000 minus 500 divided by the 5-year life, or $500 per year. The book value is going to be equal to the initial value minus all the depreciation you've taken to date. And in this case, we've taken 3 years of depreciation. So the initial value of 3,000 minus 3 years at 500 per year is $1,500. And the gain is then equal to the salvage value minus the book value, or the salvage value, which is the amount you're selling it for in year 3, $2,000, minus $1,500. So the taxes is going to be that gain times the tax rate, and which is $200. So the cash that we're going to get is the amount we're sold it for, $2,000, minus the taxes we paid. So the net cash flow is $1,800. Now we can also use this equation down at the bottom, but we do need to also know the depreciation at purchase. And in this case, it was $500 like we did before, but then otherwise we know everything else from that description. So we're just going to plug it in, and we get the value of $1,800, which is the same as the other one, but this is just an equation that you can use, plug and chug in there. So given the following information, this is an example. We could go through an example here. I'm also going to go through this example in using Excel so that you can see how it is that I set up this kind of example in Excel. So in this case, we're given the following information. We want to know if the project justified using a 10% MARR, a discount rate. The initial investment was $8,000, and initially the salvage value was thought to be $1,600. And that's how we're going to set up the depreciation, which is for a 5-year life, and we're going to use double declining balance switching to straight line. We also have information about the profit associated with it. We're going to sell 10,000 units. The sales price is going to be 50 cents, and the cost of those units is 12 cents. We also have ongoing operating expense associated with this project of $600, a tax rate of 40%, and we're assuming it's a 3-year life, and it will be sold for $3,000 at the end of the 3-year life. So for depreciation then, that's the first thing we're going to calculate, is we're going to use double declining balance switching to straight line. So we need to know the alpha value, which is 2 over n, or 40%. So we're going to set up this table like we did before when we were doing the double declining balance switching to straight line. On the first year, we start with the book value of $8,000, take the double declining balance depreciation, which is 40% of 8,000, or 3,200. We also do the calculation for straight line depreciation of $1,280. We choose the larger, which is 3,200, and therefore the book value is going to 8,000 minus 3,200, or 4,800. And we do that for each of the 3 years. We're not going to go into the 4th and 5th years because we know already we're selling it at year 3. So we're just going to use these 3 years of depreciation in the calculations. So the next thing we want to know is, what is the salvage value at the end of the sale? We know the book value in year 3, which is from this value, is $17.28. So we're going to use that book value in our calculations. The gain is equal to the salvage value minus the book value, or $3,000, which is the selling price, minus $17.28, which is $12.72. And then the taxes then are going to be 40% of that gain. And then so the cash is going to be the salvage value of $3,000 minus the taxes paid, which is $24.91. So we're going to go ahead and use that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do these calculations in Excel. So for revenue, we see that I want to also show you that I have added a row here, which is the cash from the sale of the assets value. And also it's the cash associated with the purchase and the sale of the assets. So in year 0, I have a minus $8,000, which is associated with the purchase of it. And I'm going to go back to this calculation, and I'm going to see that the cash from the sale is $24.91. So I'm going to put this in as a positive value. This is the salvage value in that year. The other thing I need to get from my previous calculations is the depreciation amounts. So I'm going to use 3,200, 1920, and 1152. So that was what I had on those previous calculations. I'm also going to go ahead and put them down below because I also add this back when I get this calculation. So you see I have a year 0. Nothing happens in revenue in year 0, but it does happen in year 1, 2, and 3. So I know I'm going to have a sales volume of 10,000 times a selling price of 50 cents. I also know I'm going to have that same amount of sales volume times a cost of 12 cents. I also know operating expense are $6,000. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy these values over. Also, this value is going to be the revenue minus the cost of goods sold. That's how we calculate gross margin. I'm going to bring that over. Taxable income is gross margin minus operating expense minus depreciation. Happens to be 0, which is odd, but it does. Then the taxes is going to be this number times 0.4. I'm going to also drag that over. The net income is the taxable income minus taxes. Still 0 in the first year, but in the other years it's not 0. And then the cash flow is equal to net income plus depreciation. Again, drag that over. And then the total cash flow is going to be the net income plus the cash from sale or purchase of assets. So now I have the cash flow for every year. We have an initial investment and we have the 3 years of cash flows. So sometimes when I do this calculation, I'm going to show you how I do net present value calculation a couple different ways. In this case, I'm going to take this value and divide it by 1 plus the interest rate to the power associated here. And that's 1. So it's just going to show you as a 1 power. And then I'm going to bring that over because in this year it'll reference the C2. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't really like that many decimal places, so I'm going to decrease them down. So then if I take the total of this, I sum this up, that will be my net present value. Now another way to do this is to use a net present value calculation, but the problem with net present value is it calculates it at the beginning of the year. So I need to use this one because this actually is year 0 that includes at the end of the year. But in this function I'm going to put 0.1 and then I'm going to show these values out for 3 years. And you can see I have the same answer for this cash flow. So in this case, this project is a good project. We're going to go and say that's greater than 0, so it's a good project to do. So in this video, we went through a calculation of the after-tax cash flow, and I also went through an example using Excel.